to talk about personal privacy rights for the American citizens. It was just 2 months ago that the Senate took action to restore privacy rights of American citizens through the USA Freedom Act, part of action that was taken, as I mentioned, just 2 months ago. Both chambers of Congress and the President agreed it was time to end bulk collection of America's call records flowing into the federal government. I was a proud supporter of the USA Freedom Act and believed it was the right thing to do on behalf of U.S. citizens. My constituents all across Nevada, from Elko to Reno, Ely, and Las Vegas, all understand how important these rights are and will not accept any attempts to diminish them. Today, I'm here to continue protecting these privacy rights and upholding our civil liberties. Protecting privacy will always be important to Nevadans. It's non-negotiable to me. Very important. Like many of my colleagues in the Senate, I also believe that addressing cybersecurity is also important. When I was ranking member of the Commerce Committee's Consumer Protection Subcommittee, I worked on these issues in detail. I understand very well the impact of data breaches, cyber threats. In fact, identity theft is one of the top concerns back in my state of Nevada. Not only can these identity thieves wreak financial havoc on a consumer's life, but these threats also pose a serious national security concern. We saw with OPM's breach that personal information for 21.5 million federal employees, even those who've received security clearances, was compromised. And in my office, in fact, a member of my staff was breached 3 times in just the last 4 years. These thieves cross international borders. They break and enter into private homes. They hack their way to intrusion with a keyboard and a simple click of the mouse. So I share the desire to find a path forward on information sharing between the federal government and the private sector as another tool in the cybersecurity toolbox. But I've always stood firm with these types of efforts that they must also maintain America's privacy rights. And the bill I see today, including the substitute amendment, does not do enough to ensure personally identifiable information is stripped out before sharing. That's why I filed a fix. Let's strengthen the standard for stripping out this information. Right now, this bill says that the private sector and the federal government only have to strip out personal information if they know it's not directly related to a cyber threat. I'd like to offer some context to this. Let's say you're pulled over for speeding. Not knowing the speed limit does not absolve you of guilt. If your company fails to follow a federal law or regulation, not knowing about the law does not exempt you from the consequences of violating it. Ignorance is no excuse under the law, so why should this particular piece of legislation be any different? My amendments assure that when personal information is being stripped out, it is because the entity reasonably believes, not knows, but reasonably believes it is not related to a cyber threat. One of my amendments addresses the federal government's responsibility to do this, and the other addresses the private sector's responsibility to do this. This term, reasonably believes, let me repeat that, reasonably believes is an important distinction that this bill needs. It creates a wider protection for personal information by ensuring these entities are making an effort to take out personal information that is not necessary for cybersecurity. And our friends over in the House of Representatives already agree that the private sector should be held to this standard, which is why they included this language in the cybersecurity bill, which they passed. I hope to see this important protection retained in any conference agreement should this bill move forward. Furthermore, in a letter to a senator last week, DHS directly acknowledged the importance of removing personally identifiable information and even went so far to say this removal will allow the information sharing regime to function much better. Even DHS agrees with this amendment, it would function much better. So what it comes down to, Mr. President, is our nation's commitment to balancing the needs for sharing cybersecurity information with the need to protect America's personal information. I believe my amendment number 2548, to hold the federal government accountable, strikes that balance and will continue strongly pushing forward to get this vote. I encourage my colleagues to support this common sense effort to strengthen the bill, keep our commitment to upholding the rights of all United States citizens. As we discuss this issue, Mr. President, I hope we'll continue having the opportunity to truly debate and make improvements to this bill. I believe that if given the opportunity, we can strengthen this legislation even more to protect against cybersecurity threats while also protecting American citizens' private information. No bill is perfect, Mr. President, you know that, but that's why we're here, and that's why there is an amendment process. That is why I'd like to see the Senate openly debate and amend this bill, including my amendment. The privacy rights of Americans are too important an issue, and very important issue to all of us. Now, Mr. President, I acknowledge that some of my colleagues want the opportunity to debate issues related to the bill and those issues that are unrelated to the bill. I recognize there are many important issues members would like to see addressed before August, or at least the August recess, such as my friend from Kentucky who filed an amendment regarding firearms on bases. And like my colleague, I recognize the importance of this issue, which is why I introduced this legislation days ago. My legislation would simply require the Secretary of Defense to establish a process for base commanders in the U.S. to authorize a service member to carry a concealed personal firearm while on base. Men and women who serve our country deserve to feel safe and should be able to defend themselves while stationed in the United States. That's why I feel strongly that Congress should give our nation's base commanders the authority they need to create a safer environment for our heroes serving across America. At this time, I recognize that it's unclear if there will be an opportunity to debate this issue on this particular piece of legislation, but Mr. President, it's an important issue. Once again, I hope that as we continue to debate this bill, that we will find a path forward on all amendments. I appreciate both Senator Burr and Feinstein's willingness to work with me on my amendments and look forward to continuing this debate. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.